Most people know Eve's Bayou as Roger Ebert's pick for Best Film of 1997, but behind this haunting Southern Gothic masterpiece lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets. From a British rock band that named themselves after a fruit-stealing scene to a major character who was digitally erased by nervous studio executives, the making of this acclaimed drama is filled with stranger-than-fiction moments that rival any voodoo spell in the movie itself. Fact 1. A British rock band named themselves after a pineapple thief. When most people think about the lasting impact of Eve's Bayou, they probably don't imagine it inspiring the name of a British progressive rock band, but that's exactly what happened back in 1999. The Pineapple Thief, a well-known band in the progressive rock scene, got their unusual name from a single moment in Kasi Lemon's film, and the story behind it is surprisingly casual for such a specific reference. Band founder Bruce Sword was at home with his girlfriend, who later became his wife, when they decided to watch this American independent film that had been getting critical acclaim. During one particular scene in the movie, a young girl steals a pineapple, and someone in the film shouts out, "I can see you, pineapple thief!" It was just a brief moment in the larger story, but something about that phrase caught Sword's attention immediately. What makes this story even more amusing is that Sword admits he had been drinking that evening, specifically a few too many glasses of Blossom Hill, which he describes as a choice made because he was young and poor at the time. In that slightly tipsy state, when he heard the line about the pineapple thief, he turned to his girlfriend and declared, "That'll do for a name." He had been looking for something to call his musical project, which he initially thought would just be a one-album experiment, and this random line from a Louisiana set family drama seemed perfect. The timing was pure coincidence, but it worked out perfectly for Sword, who needed a name for what would eventually become a long-running and successful progressive rock band. Years later, the Pineapple Thief has released 16 studio albums and built a dedicated following, all thanks to a moment of inspiration sparked by a fruit theft in Eve's Bayou and some affordable wine. Fact 2. Meagan Good was too old for her original role. In one of the strangest casting switches in film history, Meagan Good literally grew out of her starring role in Eve's Bayou before the cameras even started rolling. When director Kasi Lemons first cast the young actress, Good was supposed to play 10-year-old Eve Batiste, the main character whose perspective drives the entire story, but the lengthy process of securing funding for this independent film meant that by the time production was ready to begin, Good had aged out of the part completely. The problem wasn't that Good had done anything wrong or that Lemons had changed her mind about the actress, but rather that the film industry's complicated financing process had taken much longer than anyone expected. Independent films often struggle to find investors willing to take risks on untested directors and unconventional stories, and Eve's Bayou was no exception to this reality. Lemons spent years trying to convince studios and producers to back her vision for this Southern Gothic family drama, and during those crucial years of meetings and negotiations, Good kept growing up. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that Lemons found a creative solution that worked out perfectly for everyone involved. Instead of recasting Good entirely and losing her talent, the director simply moved her to a different role in the same film. Good became Cicely, Eve's older teenage sister, a character that was much better suited to her new age and maturity level. This casting change actually ended up being ideal, because Good could bring authentic teenage energy to Cicely's complex emotional journey through the story. The role of young Eve eventually went to Smilelette, who was the right age at the time and delivered a powerhouse performance that helped launch her career. Meanwhile, Good got to keep her place in the film and delivered an equally compelling performance as the troubled older sister, proving that sometimes the best casting decisions come from adapting to unexpected circumstances rather than sticking rigidly to original plans. Fact 3. A deleted character was digitally removed from every scene. One of the most unusual post-production decisions in Eve's Bayou involved completely erasing a major character from the film using technology that was extremely rare for 1997. Uncle Tommy, a mute family member who served as a silent witness to all the dark secrets unfolding in the Batiste household, was originally written and filmed as an important supporting character, but studio executives got nervous about his presence and demanded that he be completely removed from the final cut. Uncle Tommy's role in the story was both symbolic and practical, representing those family members who know terrible truths but can't or won't speak about them. According to director Kasi Lemons, This character existed so that the real truth could be contained in a person who couldn't tell or affect the story directly. He was meant to witness events so that the audience could witness them too. But his inability to speak meant he couldn't help or intervene in any meaningful way, which added to the film's sense of helplessness and tragedy. The problem arose when the financial backers became concerned that having Uncle Tommy in the film would make the abuse storyline too explicit and clear-cut, potentially hurting the movie's marketability. They believed that audiences and critics would respond better to a version where the truth remained ambiguous and open to interpretation, rather than having a character who clearly witnessed everything but couldn't speak about it. What makes this decision particularly notable is that the filmmakers didn't just cut Uncle Tommy's scenes or dialogue, but actually used early digital removal technology to erase him from background shots where he had already been filmed. This kind of digital manipulation was cutting edge for the time and required significant technical expertise and expense. Most films in 1997 simply couldn't afford or access this type of post-production work, making Uncle Tommy's digital disappearance a surprisingly high-tech solution to a creative disagreement between the director and her financial partners. Fact 4. Kasi Lemmons made a proof-of-concept short film. Before Kasi Lemmons could convince anyone to give her millions of dollars to make Eve's Bayou, she had to prove that she knew how to direct a film, which led to the creation of one of the most unusual audition pieces in cinema history. Since Lemmons had only worked as an actress up to that point, with no directing experience on her resume, producer Caldecott Chubb told her she would need to demonstrate her abilities behind the camera before any studio would take her seriously, especially since she was not only a first-time director but also a black woman in an industry that rarely gave such opportunities. The solution was a 19-minute short film called Dr. Hugo, which Lemmons created by taking a section of her Eve's Bayou screenplay and turning it into a standalone story. The short featured the same type of character that Samuel L. Jackson would later play in the full film, but instead of Jackson, the role went to Vondie Curtis Hall, who happened to be Lemmons' husband and an established actor in his own right. Curtis Hall played the titular doctor as a smooth-talking medical professional who made house calls around the neighborhood, attracting the attention of attractive young women wherever he went. What makes Dr. Hugo particularly interesting is how different its tone was from the final Eve's Bayou film. While the feature movie deals with heavy themes of family trauma, infidelity, and childhood trauma in a serious Southern Gothic style, the short film was surprisingly light and comedic in its approach. The doctor character moves through his world with confidence and charm, and the film focuses more on his charismatic interactions with patients than on any deeper psychological drama. The short film served its purpose perfectly, demonstrating that Lemmons had the technical skills and creative vision to handle a larger production. Dr. Hugo impressed the right people and helped secure the funding for Eve's Bayou, proving that sometimes the best way to get your dream project made is to create a smaller version that shows what you're capable of achieving. Fact 5. Deborah Cox's hit music video used the same house. The elegant Louisiana mansion that served as the Batiste family home in Eve's Bayou got a second chance at stardom when it became the backdrop for one of the biggest R&B hits of the late 1990s. Deborah Cox's music video for Nobody's Supposed to Be Here was filmed on the exact same property where Kasi Lemmons had shot her acclaimed drama, and the connection between these two projects came about through one director's deep appreciation for the film's visual beauty and emotional atmosphere. Darren Grant, who was hired to direct Cox's music video, had been completely captivated by Eve's Bayou when he saw it in theaters. The film's lush cinematography, mysterious bayou setting, and the way it captured the heat and mysticism of Louisiana made a lasting impression on him. When he got the call to work on Cox's video, Grant immediately knew he wanted to create something that would capture a similar mood and visual style, and he remembered the stunning location where Lemmons had filmed her movie. The timing worked out perfectly because Cox's song dealt with themes of love, heartbreak, and emotional vulnerability that seemed to match the Southern Gothic atmosphere of the Eve's Bayou location. Grant felt that shooting in New Orleans and using the same property would give the music video the kind of emotional depth and visual richness that the song deserved. He specifically wanted to tap into what he called the heat of the summer and the mysticism that comes along with that, which had made such a strong impact on him when watching the film. The decision to use the same location created an interesting connection between two very different but equally powerful pieces of art from the late 1990s. Both the film and the music video used the Louisiana setting to explore themes of family, relationships, and the complex emotions that come with love and loss, proving that the right location can enhance storytelling across completely different mediums and genres. Fact 6. Roger Ebert's review literally made Kasi Lemon's career. In what might be the most powerful example of how a single film critic can change someone's life, Roger Ebert's endorsement of Yves Bayou transformed Kasi Lemons from an unknown first-time director into one of the most respected filmmakers in independent cinema. When Ebert not only gave the film a rare 4-star review but also declared it the best film of 1997 on his influential television show, the impact on Lemons' career was immediate and life-changing. The emotional weight of Ebert's support wasn't lost on Lemons, who has been completely open about how much his review meant to her personally and professionally. She keeps his original 4-star review framed in her home as a reminder of that pivotal moment, but she's admitted that she still can't read the entire review without becoming emotional, even decades later. The significance of having someone as respected and influential as Ebert champion her work was overwhelming for a director who had struggled for years just to get her film made. What made Ebert's endorsement particularly powerful was the way he described the film's achievements, comparing Lemon's work to masters like Ingmar Bergman and praising her ability to create such a sophisticated debut feature. He wrote that the film resonates in the memory and called it one of the very best films of the year, giving it the kind of serious critical attention that many independent films never receive. Lemons has been direct about the impact of this support, stating simply that Roger made my career, and explaining how his recommendation told everyone to go see her movie. His endorsement didn't just boost the film's box office performance, it also opened doors for Lemons throughout Hollywood and established her reputation as a filmmaker worth watching. The review became a calling card that helped her secure future projects and proved that sometimes one critic's passionate support can literally change the trajectory of an entire career. Fact 7. The film's budget was only $4 million but made cinema history. Yves Bayou achieved something that most independent films can only dream of by turning a modest $4 million budget into both critical acclaim and serious box office success, proving that great storytelling doesn't require blockbuster spending. The film earned $14 million domestically, which meant it made back more than 3 times its production cost and became the most commercially successful independent film of 1997, an achievement that put it in rare company among art house releases. This financial success was particularly impressive because independent films typically struggle to find wide audiences, especially when they deal with complex family dramas rather than more commercial genres like action or comedy. Yves Bayou managed to connect with both critics and general audiences, largely through word-of-mouth recommendations and strong reviews that encouraged people to seek out this unique Southern Gothic story. The film's success showed that there was a real hunger for sophisticated stories about Black families that went beyond the urban settings and themes that dominated most African American cinema at the time. What makes the film's commercial achievement even more remarkable is how completely the Academy Awards ignored it during the 1998 ceremony. Despite earning widespread critical praise, being named the best film of the year by one of America's most respected film critics, and proving its popular appeal through strong box office numbers, Yves Bayou received exactly 0 Oscar nominations in any category. This complete shutout led to significant criticism of the Academy's voting process and raised questions about whether the organization was truly recognizing the year's best filmmaking or simply overlooking work by directors and actors of color. The contrast between the film's obvious success in every measurable way and its complete absence from the Oscar nominations became a talking point that highlighted ongoing issues with diversity and recognition in Hollywood's most prestigious awards ceremony, making Yves Bayou an important case study in how critical and commercial success don't always translate to industry recognition. Fact 8. Smilelette was cast at the last minute. In one of the most nerve-wracking casting situations in film history, Kasi Lemons came dangerously close to shutting down production of Yves Bayou because she couldn't find the right actress to play the title character, and it wasn't until the very last moment that Smilelette saved the entire project. Lemons had already secured financing, hired her crew, and was literally building sets for the film when she realized she still didn't have her most important cast member, the 10-year-old girl who would carry the entire story on her shoulders. The director had been searching for the perfect Eve for months, conducting what seemed like endless auditions and casting calls throughout the industry, but nobody felt right for the complex role that required a child actor to handle heavy emotional material with sophistication and authenticity. Lemons needed someone who could convincingly portray a young girl processing traumatic family secrets while also serving as the film's narrator and emotional center, which was an incredibly demanding role for any actor, let alone a child. As construction continued on the Louisiana sets and the scheduled start date for filming approached, Lemons began to seriously consider whether she might have to abandon the project entirely if she couldn't find her lead actress soon. The pressure was enormous, because everything else was falling into place perfectly. But without the right person to play Eve, none of the other preparation would matter at all. The breakthrough came when Smillette's mother finally agreed to let her daughter audition for the role, and Lemons immediately knew she had found her Eve. Smilelette, who had some television experience but was still relatively unknown, brought exactly the combination of innocence and emotional depth that the role required. Lemons later described finding Smilette as happening just in the nick of time. And given how close the production came to being cancelled, those words were probably more literal than most people realized at the time. Fact 9. The Otis house has a horror movie history. The beautiful antebellum mansion that served as the elegant Batiste family home in Eve's Bayou had already starred in a much darker and more terrifying film 16 years earlier, creating one of the strangest location coincidences in cinema history. The Otis house at Fairview Riverside State Park in Louisiana was used as a key location in the 1981 supernatural horror film The Beyond, which told the story of a woman who inherits an old hotel that was built directly over one of the 7 gateways to hell. In The Beyond, the same gracious rooms and stately architecture that would later house the sophisticated Batiste family were transformed into the setting for gruesome supernatural encounters and demonic manifestations. The film was part of Italian director Lucio Fulci's unofficial Gates of Hell trilogy and featured the kind of graphic horror imagery that was completely opposite to the refined Southern Gothic atmosphere that Coxs Lemons would create in the same location years later. What makes this connection particularly interesting is how differently the two films used the house's natural atmosphere and architectural features. While The Beyond emphasized the building's potential for hiding dark secrets and supernatural dangers, Eve's Bayou focused on its elegance and the way it represented the prosperity and social status of the Batiste family. The same sweeping staircases, high ceilings, and period details that created menace in the horror film became symbols of refinement and cultural heritage in Lemons' drama. The Otis house, which was built in 1885 and is now maintained as a historic site and museum, has clearly proven its versatility as a filming location. Its authentic period architecture and atmospheric Louisiana setting make it perfect for stories that need to evoke the Old South, whether those stories involve demonic possessions or family secrets. The fact that it successfully served as both a gateway to hell and the home of a distinguished Creole family shows just how much a location's meaning can change depending on the story being told. Fact 10. It took 100 meetings over 2 years to get funding. The journey to get Eve's Bayou made was so grueling that Coxs Lemons literally had to pitch her script to about 100 different people over the course of 2 years, a process she described as going through the whole town twice before anyone was willing to take a chance on her vision. This wasn't just a matter of finding someone who liked the story, but convincing executives and producers that a first-time director could handle a feature film, especially one dealing with such complex themes as family secrets, racial identity, and childhood trauma in the American South. Lemons faced the double challenge of being both an unknown director and a black woman in an industry that rarely gave opportunities to either group, which meant that even when people responded positively to her screenplay, they were often hesitant to commit the money needed to actually make the film. Meeting after meeting, she would present her project to studios, production companies, and independent financiers, only to hear variations of the same response. They liked the script but weren't sure about giving a directorial debut to someone with no experience behind the camera. The breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source when Lemons connected with a producer at Trimark Pictures, a company that was primarily known for making low-budget horror films like the Leprechaun series. This producer had decided that the company wanted to expand beyond horror movies and try their hand at more serious, artistic projects, which created the perfect opportunity for someone like Lemons, who had been rejected by more traditional studios. The irony of getting funding from a horror movie company to make a sophisticated family drama wasn't lost on anyone involved, but it turned out to be exactly what Eve's Bayou needed. The producer understood that sometimes the best projects come from unexpected places, and Trimark's willingness to take risks on unconventional material gave Lemons the chance to prove that her 2 years of meetings and rejections had been worth the effort. Fact 11. The director's cut runs 8 minutes longer. For decades, fans of Eve's Bayou didn't realize they might have been watching a different version of the film than what Coxs Lemons originally intended. Because the director's cut of the movie has had one of the most confusing release histories in modern cinema, the situation became even more complicated when the Criterion Collection released a definitive version on October 25, 2022, featuring a 116-minute director's cut that was substantially longer than the original theatrical release. The director's cut includes approximately 8 minutes of additional footage that was removed from the theatrical version, though the exact amount varies depending on how you count the scenes because some sections were restructured rather than simply added or deleted. What makes this particularly interesting is that these extra scenes weren't cut because they were inappropriate or poorly made, but rather because the studio wanted to trim the running time to make the film more commercially viable for theaters that preferred shorter movies. Adding to the confusion around different versions of the film, some DVD releases over the years accidentally contained the director's cut instead of the theatrical version, which meant that viewers might have seen the longer version without even knowing it. This happened because the film's distribution rights changed hands multiple times. And different companies sometimes use different source materials when creating their home video releases. The deleted footage that appears in the director's cut includes expanded character development and additional scenes that provide more context for the family's complicated relationships, particularly involving characters whose storylines were shortened or removed entirely from the theatrical version. When Criterion finally released their authoritative edition, they included both versions of the film along with extensive documentation about what was changed and why, giving viewers the chance to see how editorial decisions can significantly alter a film's meaning and impact without changing its basic story structure. Fact 12. Coxs Lemons used her childhood hallucinations for the film. The haunting supernatural visions that make Eve's Bayou so memorable came from a very real and personal place in director Coxs Lemons' own childhood, when she suffered from repeated bouts of pneumonia that caused her to experience vivid hallucinations during her illness. These fever-induced visions were frightening and disorienting for young Lemons, but they also gave her a unique understanding of how the boundary between reality and imagination can become blurred, especially for a child who doesn't fully understand what's happening to them. Lemons has explained that these childhood experiences with illness-related hallucinations directly influenced how she portrayed Eve's premonitions and psychic visions throughout the film. The way Eve sees flashes of future events and disturbing images that may or may not be real was inspired by Lemons' own memories of lying in bed with a high fever and seeing things that seemed completely real but couldn't possibly be happening. This personal connection to the supernatural elements of the story helped her create visions that felt authentic and genuinely unsettling, rather than like typical movie special effects. The director's approach to filming these supernatural sequences was also influenced by her childhood experiences, as she wanted to capture the confusion and uncertainty that comes with not being able to trust your own perceptions. In the film, Eve's visions are often presented in black and white, or with unusual visual effects that make them feel different from the regular narrative scenes, which mirrors how hallucinations can feel both incredibly vivid and strangely unreal at the same time. This personal element added an extra layer of authenticity to the film's exploration of psychic abilities and spiritual beliefs, because Lemons understood from direct experience how disorienting it can be when your mind shows you things that don't match the world around you. Her childhood illness became an unexpected source of creative inspiration that helped make Eve's supernatural experiences feel grounded in genuine human emotion rather than pure fantasy. Fact 13. A jazz legend composed the haunting score. The emotionally complex musical score that gives Eve's Bayou so much of its atmospheric power was created by Terence Blanchard, a renowned jazz trumpeter and composer who was already well established in Hollywood as Spike Lee's go-to musician for film soundtracks. Blanchard brought his deep understanding of both jazz traditions and cinematic storytelling to create what many consider to be one of the finest works in his impressive career, crafting a score that perfectly captures the film's shifting moods and emotional complexity. What makes Blanchard's work on Eve's Bayou particularly remarkable is how skillfully he used music to reflect the different emotional states of the main character as she moves through her traumatic summer. When the film focuses on Eve's childhood innocence and the beauty of her Louisiana surroundings, Blanchard's music is light and jazzy, incorporating the kind of warm, melodic elements that evoke a sense of safety and wonder. However, as Eve begins to uncover her family's dark secrets and enters more dangerous emotional territory, the score becomes increasingly dramatic and ominous, using deeper orchestral elements and more complex harmonies. Blanchard's background as both a jazz musician and a film composer gave him the perfect skill set to handle a movie that needed to balance the cultural richness of Louisiana's musical traditions with the psychological complexity of a Southern Gothic family drama. His experience working with Spike Lee on films like Malcolm X and Jungle Fever had already established him as someone who could use music to enhance serious dramatic material without overwhelming the story or the performances. The composer's ability to create music that feels both rooted in authentic Louisiana jazz traditions and cinematically sophisticated helped establish the film's unique atmosphere, where the beauty of the Bayou setting contrasts with the increasingly dark family revelations that drive the plot forward throughout the story. Fact 14. The film made Time's most important films list. More than a decade after its release, Eve's Bayou received recognition from one of America's most influential magazines when Time included it on their list of the 25 most important films on race in February 2008. This distinction placed Kasi Lemon's debut film alongside legendary movies that had shaped conversations about racial representation in American cinema, acknowledging that Eve's Bayou had made a lasting impact on how Black families and experiences were portrayed on screen. The Time recognition was particularly significant because it came 11 years after the film's original release, proving that Eve's Bayou had the kind of staying power that separates truly important films from movies that are simply popular for a short time. The magazine's decision to include the film on this prestigious list showed that critics and cultural observers understood how Eve's Bayou had expanded the range of stories being told about African American life, moving beyond the urban settings and themes that dominated most Black cinema in the 1990s. 10 years later, the film received an even more prestigious honor when the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2018. This designation is reserved for films that are considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and guarantees that the movie will be preserved for future generations as part of America's cinematic heritage. The Library of Congress selection process is extremely competitive, with only 25 films chosen each year from thousands of nominations. These two major recognitions demonstrate how Eve's Bayou has been increasingly understood as more than just an excellent independent film, but as a culturally important work that changed how stories about race, family, and childhood could be told in American cinema. The fact that both honors came years after the film's release shows how some movies need time to reveal their true significance and influence on the medium. Fact 15. The opening line took years to perfect. One of the most memorable opening lines in cinema history didn't just appear fully formed in Kasi Lemon's mind, but evolved through years of writing and rewriting as she developed the story that would become Eve's Bayou. The haunting narration that begins, "Memory is the selection of images, some elusive, others printed indelibly on the brain. The summer I killed my father, I was 10 years old," represents the final version of words that Lemons had been crafting and refining for much longer than most people realize. According to Lemons, the screenplay for Eve's Bayou originated as a series of short stories, and the children were the first layers in the short stories, which means that the opening narration grew out of her earlier experiments with writing about childhood memories and family secrets. These short stories served as a kind of creative laboratory where she could explore different ways of telling the same basic story, experimenting with different narrative voices and approaches until she found the right tone and perspective. The opening lines work so well because they immediately establish several key elements that define the entire film. The unreliable nature of memory, the adult perspective looking back on childhood events, and the shocking revelation that sets up the central mystery of the story. The phrase about memory being a selection of images perfectly captures how the film will present its story through fragmented recollections that may or may not be completely accurate, while the confession about killing her father immediately grabs the audience's attention and makes them want to understand how such a thing could happen. The fact that these lines emerged from years of short story writing explains why they feel so polished and literary compared to typical movie dialogue. Lemons had the luxury of refining her words through multiple drafts and different story formats before she ever had to worry about fitting them into a screenplay, which gave her the time to create an opening that works both as compelling narration and as a statement of the film's central themes.